Hi, it's AJ Hartley again. I'm a Shakespeare professor and a novelist, and I'm a fan of the Japanese kawaii metal band Babymetal. I started doing a few videos a couple of weeks ago in which I talk through some of their early songs just to articulate what I liked about them, and people have responded very positively and favorably. So I am going to do another. Today I'm talking about Akatsuki, which is another song off the first album. It was not a single. It's some people refer to it as a tribute to the pioneering Japanese rock band X Japan, a song that they did particularly called Kurenai. And if you listen to that song, you'll hear some sort of musical resonances. That the vocal is very different, but the structure of the song is sort of similar. Um, and and the way that the kanji are written for Akatsuki evoke Kurenai, um, so that what could be simply dawn in Japanese, the Akatsuki pronunciation is also crimson moon. Um, so there are connections between the two. I'm not going to talk a lot about that because other people know that stuff better than I do, and you can ferret them out in the nooks and crannies of the internet, or fox them out, perhaps is a better term. So Akatsuki is written by Nakametal and Subametal, with the arrangement by Kyoto. I know very little about any of those. Again, if you know more, feel free to contribute. My response is to the execution of the song and to its performance. I came into this one without a lot of clear ideas that I wanted to approach, unlike some of the ones that I talked about before, particularly the last one. So I thought that this would be short. That didn't go according to plan, as you will see, but I apologize for that. But hopefully you'll find something interesting or amusing or entertaining in what follows. Thanks. So, unlike the last couple of recordings that I've done, I I don't know what I'm going to say about this. Not because I haven't seen it before or haven't heard the song before many times. I have, but I'm not sitting down with a set of specific ideas that I want to get across, and I'm not going to do all the sort of cultural history and stuff that I did with the Megetsune. So let's just see where this leads us. So this is a live recording, Legend 1999, 2013 show. Okay, so I'm not going to play a lot of this particular version. It sounds very like the album. The vocal style is very like the album, so I'm going to actually use a different live version, because one of the things that interests me about the song is the way that the way that Sue Metal's voice has changed over the years, as she's become more mature, and the way that she approaches the song. So this is an unusual Babymetal song in that it's basically a solo. Yui and Moa are not on stage at all here, and they don't participate in the song. The other thing is that in many ways it's a fairly straightforward song, though there are complexities which I'll get to in a second. But the lyrics are quite clear in this first part. Ikusen mono yoru o koete ikitsuzukeru ai ga aru kara. So going over 1,000 nights, lasting longer than some love will survive. Kono karara ga horobiru made, inochi ga kieru made mamori tsuzukete yuku. So until this body dies or perishes, and my life vanishes, I will keep holding on to this love. And this is the core of the song. The whole song, it's in some ways you might consider it a torch song, in musical theater terms, a song about how much you love somebody, except that it's not exactly that, because we never talk about who the other person is. It's about holding on to the feeling, the idea of this love. And the whole song is about that experience, not all of which is positive, but which has this extraordinary power which you don't want to give up. So in that sense, it connects to what I was saying about Headbanger, this idea of trying to fix a particular moment in time because you know that it has value. As I said, that recording was made in 2013. This one was recorded only a few months later, in 2014, less than a year. And you'll hear that it sounds radically different, not just because the orchestration is different, but because her vocal style is different. That first version, it's very measured, very even. Every syllable gets the same amount of emphasis. Listen to this in comparison. You hear what I'm talking about? That first version is so even, right? Both in terms of emphasis, but in terms of volume and pitch. It's very steady. It's exactly like the studio recording. And this, only a few months later, is a radically different, much more mature sound. The phrasing is quite different. She's creating little pauses in order to create emphasis on the words, and it feels much, much more personal. And, I chose this song because I really, really like it. It's one of the first Babymetal songs that I just fell in love with, and it made me think there's really something going on here that goes beyond the sort of gimme chocolate gimmickry is perhaps too unfair, but that's the way it played initially, right? 5 years ago, when they sort of broke out outside Japan, there was that sense that this is a novelty act, and I remember thinking that, and then digging into the catalog and starting to find things that I found interesting. And I remember hearing this song and thinking, wow, there's something going on here. And I still find it incredibly emotional to listen to, and I'm struggling to rationalize why that is. And I think it's something to do with the clarity, the purity of the voice, along with a kind of unabashed melodic technique. Mostly I listen to what you would call alternative rock or alternative pop, and if you listen to a lot of songs in that tradition these days, there's frequently, the melody line will be, in the verse, 3-4 note span, and then maybe in the chorus it'll move up a little higher pitch and do something else within a 3 or 4 note span. And the performance is frequently incredibly understated and very personalized, and in ways that sound both cool and self-deprecating and very mellow, and I think part of what I find so powerful about this stuff is that there's a kind of unrepentant openness and unafraid of belting out the song full heart, full voice, and running the gamut of the scale. That a song like this is going to have a full sort of octave span or more as she sort of moves through the range of the song, and it feels curiously honest and vulnerable, or at least that's the way it seems to me. I watch some of these reaction videos. Everybody watches reaction videos, right? I'm sure I would get a lot more hits if I just sat here and went, oh, this is awesome. I didn't think I was going to like this, but it's really great. whatever. There's a million of those out there. Feel free to enjoy them, and I do. But that's what I'm doing. But occasionally with some of those things, you'll watch people get emotionally sort of choked up, and I've seen people weeping uncontrollably and not able to pinpoint what it is that they're responding to. And I frequently feel like that about these guys, and I don't quite know what it is, but it's something to do with this sort of open, and in these early stages of their career, almost childlike vulnerability, combined with this absolute open-hearted honesty that you hear in the phrasing of the song. And then, of course, we get this extra dimension when we move from this very emotional setup to the guitars coming in. There's an acoustic version of this, which I'll show a little later on, which is wonderful in other ways, not least because it shows off Sue Metal's voice so beautifully. But I just love these guitars, and I love, again, this juxtaposition of the sort of sweet and wholesome with the sort of edge of this sort of speed metal riff-driven guitar. And of course, the sort of virtuosity of these guys is staggering. I could just sit here and just let it play, but I'm not going to, because the muse will take it down. So let me say something about this. I love the fact that when the vocal comes back, it still has that sort of gravitas to it, the weight and the seriousness, while the guitars and drums and everything are driving through. And we're hearing some other, I think, recorded instruments as well in the background that are not being played live. But that's okay. We're in this situation. Hitomi no Okuni Hikaru, so shining in the depths of your eye. It's like there's an ambiguity here at the center of the song about what exactly the situation is. The song, generally speaking, is about this incredibly powerful love, and then. But we don't know who is looking at whose eyes are who, because there is a sort of a built-in ambiguity, which I'll talk about in a second. And I think this connects to the title of the song. Akatsuki means dawn, but it can also mean crimson moon, which in some ways is a paradox. Both of them involve a kind of redness, which I think comes up throughout the song and connects to ideas of blood and maybe fire, but particularly blood. This idea that what we're talking about here is it involves two people, but it's not clear that the two people are together. So we're looking at seeing the sort of the red moon reflected in your eye, and brimming with tears, red tears, so blood-like tears, which are going to somehow flood out and dye the whole sky with the idea of the rising dawn. Yeah, and then this sort of even more troublesome verse, Seijaku no Nakade. So in the depth of the silence, there are. I'm facing a damaged or blunted blade, or two blades are facing each other. It's not entirely clear, and feelings of loneliness and uneasiness slashing my heart or our hearts. It gets tricky because, unlike English, you don't need to specify the number of people or objects when you express a verb, right? The verb doesn't have to have that marker. You can say, go, and it could be I go, or you go, or we go, and that's not necessarily built into the sentence, where in English you can't do that without specifying who the subject is, because it's a different culture and a different form of emphasis. So in this situation, I've looked at a number of different translations, and I watched um, Dwayne Metal's video on this subject. I even consulted the highest authority, my Japanese mother-in-law, and there's still a general sense of ambiguity. We don't know if the blades are metaphorical or literal. I assume that they're metaphorical. We don't know if it's one person sort of feeling like their heart has been slashed, or if we're slashing each other's hearts, or if the blades represent some sort of external threat to our love. None of that is really clear. And even with Dwayne Metal's video talking about it, he sort of explains the meaning of each word really, really well. But I'm still on the other side of it, not entirely clear what it says. And I think that this is built into the nature of a song like this, that is deliberately ambiguous because what it's trying to do is paint an emotional picture rather than give you specifics. And like I was saying before, the song is about the feeling of being in love and the joy and the pain of that, that makes you feel alive and you don't want to give up on it ever. But it's not interested in telling you what the other person is like, right? In that sort of 50s rock song tradition where it'll be called Jolene, or I mean, not that's a bad example, but that you might put the name of somebody in it, or tell us something about what he or she looks like, or something like that. This song's not interested in that. This song is all about the core feeling, and I think that this speaks to some of that emotional power that I feel in the song. And I do think it's connected to the youth of the singer in some ways, because what the song is encapsulating is the kind of thing that often gets captured in, say, a young adult novel, right? And I write young adult novels, among other things. And over the last few years, couple of decades, we have kind of, in the publishing industry, people discovered what we should have already known, that a lot of young adult literature was not being read by young adults. It was being read by older people. And that there was a real appeal to reading the literature of adolescence to people who were no longer adolescent. Why? Because when you're an adolescent, you're experiencing everything for the first time. And every friendship is intense, and every betrayal is the greatest disaster in the history of the world, and every love is something that cannot possibly be recreated. And there's this sense that every day is a new set of experiences that sends the blood pumping, and you're living on the edge, right? And as you get older, for better and worse, we lose that sense of the intensity of experience as we focus on the sort of mundane details of life, paying mortgages and getting jobs and so on. And even love, can become sort of, those initial extraordinary intense peaks are kind of unsustainable, and eventually relationships stabilize. And they have to, right? This is where we have to live. We can't live on the edge all the time. But we hanker back for this kind of feeling, for that sense of something that we don't want to abandon. I think this is why adults love to read books where people are just figuring out who they are and experiencing things very intensely for the first time. So what I'm saying is that the ambiguity that we see in a stanza like that is designed to take away the specifics of what has created the situation, so that it's easier for us as listeners to apply our own situation and fasten onto what the song is about, which is the intensity of the experience rather than the circumstances which have created it. And I think that that's part of why it sort of transcends a particular adolescent moment and gives us something that we want to hold on to. I'll say also that if you look at the stanza and see the way that it's been translated online, you'll frequently notice that that verse that Seijaku no Nakade and everything that follows in that little stanza there, is repeated exactly later in the song. And frequently translators will translate the two verses quite differently, and they'll say things like, two damaged blades stand face to face, our loneliness and our uneasiness / even our hearts. And then they'll say, in the silence, I hold the damaged blade face to face, my loneliness and my uneasiness, I / even my heart. Now, I'm not finding fault with the translator, but the fact is, the words don't change in the repetition. Now, both of those versions are potentially valid readings of the stanza, whether it's us slashing ourselves, or me slashing my heart, or something else entirely. Those are perfectly valid interpretations. What's not accurate is to suggest that the meaning changes in the course of the song. It doesn't. What the song is doing is inviting you to add your own perspective, to take from what the words are offering you and build your own reality, right? And I think this is fundamental to the way we interpret music, whether we're conscious of it or not. People frequently bring in various kinds of authority about, what the songwriter intended and stuff like that. It doesn't matter. None of that matters, right? The author is dead. Speaking as an author, I can say this. Once the song or the book or whatever is out in the public, you cease to control its meaning. And what you intended does not matter. We derive meaning from the way that we respond to it and the way that we maybe see it in a particular kind of cultural framework or context, coming out of a particular historical moment, whatever. That's fine. But, if the songwriter for Akatsuki, or for that matter, Shakespeare, we found a book that said, here's what I meant when I wrote Hamlet. Nobody cares, Bill. Whatever you intend, you put in there, and we will see it. But, frequently authors and songwriters and so on are articulating things that they are not conscious of, things that come out of their own experience and culture that they're not really thinking about. So our job as listeners is to make of it what makes the most sense to us. I think that's perfectly valid. Okay, I'm just going to stop it before the guitars come in. So this is Takayoshi Omura and Leda Cygnus, who I assume is fascinated by Greek mythology, whose real name is Shinji Yuto. And these remarkable guitarists get to do something that Babymetal loves. They love having two lead guitars so that they can harmonize with each other. And in the course of this solo, first they start switching off. And I think in some ways it's the musical counterpart to Yui and Moa, right? That we've got Sue in the middle and these vocals going back and forth and commenting on what she does, not in this song, but elsewhere in Babymetal. And here we're doing the same thing with the guitars. And you'll hear the guitars first responding to each other and then coming together and playing like a third apart in this beautiful and poignant solo, and again, it's something to do with the sound frequently, because they do such a great job of matching the sound of the music, the guitar sound, to the intensity of the lyrics and the passion within the voice, that it's not just that the guitar work is fast and intricate, a virtuoso technical performance. It's way more than that. It's way more than that. I think there's real feeling here, and I think it's a perfect counterpoint to what the song is about. Man, that's just extraordinary. It's just exquisite. And then this next little verse, the Sujite Yuku Toki Nonaka Hitomi o Tojita Mama, and so on. So in as time passes, I keep my eyes shut, and then she says, if the sort of red thread, Akaito Kirete mo kanjite iru kizuno, the red thread flowing in my hands even if it breaks, we're still bonded together. And this idea, the red thread in my hands is clearly blood, veins, right? That's part of it. It's also, as Dwayne Metal points out, there is a tradition in Japan, an idea that the perfect lovers are connected by a red thread that binds them together, and that you don't always know who that person is until you sort of reel them in, and then you realize that you're connected. And it's fascinating because obviously there's a kind of Western analog here. Plato writes about the divided soul, that at birth the soul is split and you spend your life looking for the other half of what you already have within you, so that you're not complete until you meet the person who is, in some senses, destined to be with you. And so I think the song is doing that. This is a love, a connection which is sort of spiritual, but you feel it in the blood, right? As I said, there's a lot of redness all over this song. It's very Juliet, that kind of intensity, that sense of having become somebody different in discovering this relationship, in discovering this love, in ways that completely transform you, and ways which are indissoluble. No matter what forces you apart, this will continue, this will persist. And again, that thought is something that doesn't require us to talk about who the beloved is. It's just there, right? So the focus is very much on her, on the individual, rather than on the other person. This is not a love that diminishes you. This is a love that makes you bigger. I'm going to stop it there. So that's the repeated verse about the silence and the blades and cutting your heart, which, as I say, is exactly the same as the previous version, but which sometimes gets translated differently. So it's a return to an idea, and maybe you can read there is some sort of progression, but if so, you're putting that into the song rather than simply taking it from the lyrics, and maybe that's perfectly appropriate. I'm not sure. And here's that same moment 4 years later. This is on the Dark Knight Carnival tour from 2018, not tour, but yeah, the Dark Knight Carnival show. And you're actually seeing recordings of two different performances within that tour, which is why the costumes seem to switch. Just great, and again, I think with this latest show, we focus on the sort of the stateliness, the ferocity of the emotion and the presentation of the emotion. And one of those costumes is sort of very regal, and the other, I think it's interesting that Sue Metal looks a lot like Susie Sue, as in Susie and the Banshee, a different form of goth, sort of goth punk, from the very late 70s, early 80s. So that's the big rousing finish version, when she's shouting dye the sky crimson with whether it's the moon or the rising sun or the blood, the sense of blood rushing. That's the big rousing, determined finish. I'm going to show you another one in a second. I should say that, I think I've seen a couple of people talking occasionally about the idea that this is some sort of suicide song. I really don't think it is. And yes, there's a lot of blood in this, and there's a lot of talk about blades, but I think that the blades are supposed to be metaphors of, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, the things that put you under various kinds of pressure, and the love itself, which is in some ways damaging. But as is the case with most Babymetal songs, I think the focus is on persistence and survival and finding the positive. It's I find it hard to believe that they would write a song that was sort of suicide pact-y. But also, you know, the song itself is saying, I'm going to hold on to this until my body fades away. The implication is not that's going to happen in like 30 seconds. The implication is I'm going to live with this for the rest of my life and I'm going to keep hold of it. So as I said, that was the very sort of strong, passionate version. This acoustic version from a little bit earlier is the alternative, when it's just about the voice, and here we emphasize that sense of vulnerability, of fragility, rather than power and strength. I mean, damn. You know, talk about the range of the performer to give, and the flexibility of the song, right? This speaks again to that ambiguity I was talking about earlier. That the song can have a totally different version, a totally different feel. This is almost like doing a cover of your own song and doing it in this, not just a sort of stripped down acoustic way, but a way that changes the emotional tonality of the song quite radically. Okay. So, as I said, I wasn't going to do a lot of cultural history and stuff like that this time. I just want to talk about a song that I really like, and I have done that. So I am going to shut up. Thanks for watching, listening. Keep making suggestions and comments and such, and I'll keep doing it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.